2 weeks on from voting down Labour's plan to address the cost of living, you will announce some token measures today. The package that is emerging is around €450 million, and that is a drop in the ocean compared to what ordinary families are having to grapple with. The official government advice from ministers is to shop around for better value. For those suffering under record rent prices, they can't shop around. They need a rent freeze. For those looking at soaring energy bills up by 30%, they can't shop around for better deals. They need real intervention. For those in low-paid work, they can't shop around. They need a pay rise. For those forced to commute back to the office, they can't shop around. They need a right to flexible work. And for those wondering how they will feed their families, shopping around won't help when bread, milk and butter are all rising in price between 10 and 15% over the last number of weeks. And what we know about the cost of living package is that it won't go anywhere near far enough. Your own Minister for Public Expenditure this morning admitted that it won't go far enough. The government has already committed to a €100 million rebate on electricity bills costing €210 million. If that's doubled, it will bring it to €420 million. By our calculations, an extra 2 weeks of fuel allowance will cost €21 million. But you haven't widened eligibility. Figures provided to my colleague, Deputy Sean Sherlock, show that over 20,000 people who applied for fuel allowance last year were refused. Already this year, of over 7,000 applications received, more than 3,000 of them were rejected. In the budget, we called for eligibility to be expanded to an extra 100,000 households. Once again, it's too little and too late. Bringing forward the working family payment increase by 3 months will cost around €6 to €9 million and benefit over 50,000 families. But for the hundreds of thousands of families struggling with the cost of childcare, education and healthcare, there's nothing of substance emerging. Instead of investing in public services, you're interested in tax cuts, throwing away €600 million to people who don't need it. The VAT windfall last year was €1 billion ahead of projections. In January alone, the VAT take was €400 million ahead of what was collected in January 2020. We have the opportunity. It's about choice. There has been no shortage of solutions put forward, Tánaiste, to ease the burden on workers and families. So it's time that you shopped around for some new ideas. Will you commit to an immediate increase in the minimum wage? Will you admit that the budget last October got it wrong? Will you now commit to a real mini-budget that would do more than tinker at the edges, that would provide real relief to workers and families?
Thanks again, Deputy. I just want to acknowledge again the seriousness of this issue, the fact that the cost of living is rising fast, that many families are feeling the pinch, and that the government needs to act. And as I said in my response earlier, the government has already acted, but we will need to do more. The budget, which was passed in October, which only came into effect a few weeks ago, included a cost of living package worth more than €1 billion. And that included increases in pensions and welfare and also reductions in personal taxation for middle-income earners. And people earning 38, 45,000, 50,000 a year were the main beneficiaries of that in cash terms and percentage terms. And while the Labour Party may think that people earning 30-something thousand a year or 40-something thousand a year aren't feeling the pinch, I think you're wrong. And we stand over the fact that we reduced personal taxes for people on middle incomes, and it was capped once you hit the higher incomes. What else was in the budget? An increase in the pension across the board, increases in weekly welfare payments, and also targeted increases in payments. The living alone allowance was increased for people on welfare who have a dependent child. The child dependent allowance was increased, and the fuel allowance eligibility was widened only in the last budget, only a few months ago. So while many people would have received an increase of maybe only €5 a week, those living alone, those with dependent children, received increases of in and around €14 a week, which obviously is a much larger figure than €5 a week. There's also increases in pay, a public sector pay deal that we've agreed, providing for pay increases, albeit modest ones, this February and October. The national minimum wage just went up 5 weeks ago. We've brought in a freeze on childcare fees, which I think is being welcomed by the vast majority of families given the high cost of childcare. We've also reduced the cost of medicines. So that was a €1 billion cost of living package announced in the budget in October, legislated for in November and December, opposed by the opposition parties, came into effect only a few weeks ago. And yes, we acknowledge that because inflation is higher than we anticipated it would be, that we now have to do more. And that's what we will do today, announce additional measures to reduce the cost of living for people, particularly the cost of energy, but also putting more money into the pockets of those who need that money the most. But I also need to acknowledge, and I think you should acknowledge, that no matter what we announce, you'll say it's not enough. You don't even know what we're going to announce, and you've already said it's not enough. The press release is already written. The lines have already been sent out to your TDs and senators and councillors. No matter what the government does, you're going to say it's not enough, because promises are cheap. When you're in opposition, when you don't have to make decisions, promises are cheap, but they're not honest. And we all know what your party did in government. And it wasn't give money back to people, it was take it off them.
What you're engaged in, Tánaiste, is Bertienomics. What you're trying to convince people is that you can cut their taxes and tinker around public service and that it will all be fine. What the Labour Party suggested to you is that you shouldn't have tax cuts. And you think that's an easy thing for an opposition party to say, but it isn't. We're telling the people of Ireland straight that if you want to have a proper decrease in their cost of living, that the state should provide it and not actually wait for the market to provide solutions in rent or solutions in childcare and not be married to the market as much as you are. We believe in direct state investment, in direct state support. You won't introduce a rent freeze. You just won't do it. You won't support a properly public childcare system as in every other European country. You go to Northern Ireland, you don't have to pay for a school book, you don't have to pay for a GP visit, yet you don't have the same vision for citizens in this part of the island. So what we're saying to you in the Labour Party is that we don't want to play cheap politics. We don't want to do the auction stuff of tax cuts. We actually do believe in state intervention. But what you're trying to do is to have cheap political jibes while people are still battling for bread and milk and butter.
Thank you. Tánaiste to respond.
Thanks, Deputy. If you can avoid the cheap political jibes for the next day or two or a few weeks, I will publicly come in here and compliment you on that. You're very capable of that. When it comes to one issue on personal taxation, I disagree with you. I respectfully disagree with you. I think there are people earning 38, 40,000, 45,000 a year who are struggling with the bills too. People may have very high incomes on paper or even middle incomes on paper. When you take account of income tax, take account of childcare, take account of rent and mortgage, those exact same people can be struggling with the bills. And the best way to help people to struggle with the bills is to increase their income or reduce the amount of tax they pay, and then they can decide what they spend it on, whether it's the mortgage, whether it's the rent, whether it's childcare, whether it's energy costs, because everybody's finances are different. And the advantage of pay increases and the advantage of reducing personal taxation is you can help everyone. And that's why we stand over that decision. I agree with you on the issue of childcare. That's why we brought in 2 years of ECHE for all children. That's why we've introduced the National Childcare Scheme. And that's why there's a freeze this year on childcare fees. And I believe in the next budget, when we'll be in a position to do it, because we'll have got the fundamentals right, we'll be able to make a significant move on childcare as well.